I think what we're going to see, especially with AI, is the compliance is going to be given away. It's just going to be bundled in, and the money's going to come from the advisory. That's where the real value is. I think we're going to have to reframe how we think about value. What is the customer really buying? It's not a tax return. In fact, it's really none of the services. They're buying a transformation. They want to go from where they are to where they want to be, some desired future state. And I think if we do that, then we change the conversation and value communication becomes a little easier.
All right. This episode of the Modern CPA Success Show, we've got a returning guest, and we are all very excited about that. We even added another co-host with us for today. I'm Tom Waddleton. I'm one of the virtual CFOs at Anders VCFO. My usual co-host is here, Adam Hale. Adam, welcome today.
Hey, Tom.
So Jody Grundon is also with us, Adam. We're going to have like three hosts taking on Ron today, and Jody is co-host of another one of our podcasts, the Creative Agency Success Show. Ron Baker, our returning guest, and Ron is a talk show co-host of the voiceofamerica.com radio show called The Soul of the Enterprise, Business and the Knowledge Economy. Also author of 7 books. I've read a couple of them. Value, Pricing, and Time's Up are excellent ones, and then co-founder of VeraSage Institute. Ron, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. Adam, it's great to be here.
With that short intro, would love to hear a little bit more about kind of career journey for you, and then we'll jump into some of our topics.
Oh my God, bio bores me, but I knew I wanted to be a CPA at 15. I had a great high school accounting teacher. He had a 2-year program, and not only did he teach us how to do accounting, he also taught us to do taxes, and he would bring in CPAs from industry or practice and have them talk to us. So, I just gravitated right to it, and I would sit in this empty classroom during lunch in high school, and kids would come in with their W-2s, and I'd fill out their 1040A or whatever it was at the time, and they'd get a $70 refund, and they'd hand me 10 or 20 bucks. They were thrilled, and so I started an accounting practice in high school. My dad was a barber, and he got me a bunch of other barbers and cosmetologists, and I had a little niche, and that's how I put myself through college. And guess what, guys? I had a timesheet. I filled it out, and I billed by the hour. I had an hourly rate, a timesheet. I felt like I was, a real accountant. I even defended people in front of the IRS as a teenager, which I'm not even sure is legal, but they accepted it. And anyway, then I went into the Big 8 and thought I'd be there forever. Quickly disillusioned after 6 months, realized this wasn't for me, and left after 2.5 years, and then started my own practice. And that's when it hit me. After about 3 months in of getting complaints and phone calls from customers, why didn't you tell me it was going to cost this much? And my pat answer, I spent the time. You want to see my timesheet?
Sure.
And you know what? It's a crappy customer experience. And at the time I was studying Disney and Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus, and I was reading all of this stuff about creating a great, what we called back then, total quality service. It wasn't called customer experience. That wasn't in the parlance yet. This would have been the late 80s. And I just walked into my partner one day and said, this idea that we can't give a customer a fixed price in advance is BS. All of our customers do it. They're all in business. I work with shops and all sorts of different businesses, and they all quote a price up front. What the hell's wrong with us? And he said, let's try it. There was no one on the circuit talking about it. There were no books, no consultants, nothing, no CPE courses, at least not in the professional space. There was a whole pricing revolution going on in the business world that I wasn't aware of, but I didn't find that out until later. That started in the mid 80s. And we just started experimenting with it. We'd give customers a fixed price. We put it in a fixed price agreement. We bundled in unlimited access, meetings, phone calls, anything they wanted to talk about. Now, we had a change order policy and all of that for scope creep. But we started doing this. We made every mistake under the sun. I mean, everyone almost went back to hourly billing. My partner got so frustrated with it all. But you know what? The customers loved it. And because the customers loved it, it allowed us to differentiate, charge higher prices, have a higher minimum price, get rid of some low-value customers. So we stuck with it, and it worked so well. And then I said, hey, if we're not pricing by time, Why track it? So we got rid of the timesheet. The team loved that. No
Mm-hmm.
more tracking time in 6-minute increments. So then I wrote a book about it and started teaching for the California CPA Education Foundation in 1994 on this topic, and started spreading the word. And what is it? 32 years later, here we are.
Yeah. And you said as soon as I start telling them within 6 months or so, the whole industry profession is going to be completely different, right? I won't have anything else to talk about.
Yep.
32
I
years later.
predicted in my first book, thank God it's out of print, that the billable hour would be gone in 10 years.
Sure.
And that book came out in 98. And the billable hour is still here. And I'll tell you guys, if AI does not kill the billable hour, the damn thing is just invincible, period. If the AI doesn't put the final coffin in it, it's invincible. It'll be with us forever.
Sure.
Well, Ron, I do have a bone to pick with you.
Okay.
I was talking you up, and the whole firm at Anders is going through a pricing initiative. So we're trying to rethink exactly what you're talking about, which is pretty exciting stuff. Because, as you know, Jody and I have been doing it for a long time when
Sure.
we were independent, and so it's pretty cool to see the entire firm just kind of embracing it. And so I was like, you got to read all these guys' books. And I said, don't worry, you don't have to read them. We'll send over all the audibles.
Well,
I could not find any audibles.
Yeah. I can tell you the technical reason for that. Wiley, my publisher, at least of 7 of the books, I'm in the professional division, and they just don't do Audible books. If I wanted to do an Audible book, I'd have to do it on my own with, of course, their permission and all that. So the best I've got is a set of interviews that Ed Kless did with me on every chapter of Time's Up. It's not an Audible book, but it talks about the main ideas in that chapter, what was left out of that chapter, what got cut, by the editors or whatever for space. And that's the closest thing I have.
Well, surprise to our guests, on this 13-hour podcast, we're going to do the Audible version of Time's Up. So if you go ahead and grab it, we'll go ahead and get started.
But Adam, I do have 600 podcasts that folks can listen to. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of audio in there about value pricing and offering options and the difference between value pricing and subscription and all of that.
You say that, but that's honestly that's where I think AI could be super helpful. It's throw all those into one gigantic place and allow you just to start asking, Ron questions and get all your responses.
Ed is probably home right now working on that very task. He's already got over half of them loaded. The problem is we didn't do it on the first couple years of the show. We didn't, we were on, I think, Skype. We weren't even on Zoom yet. So he's going back and getting Otter or whoever to do all the transcripts. And
oh, that's cool.
And it can also be a great source for book material and all of that. So.
Well, through that pricing journey, sorry, Jody, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say our journey is kind of really similar to where when we first started off, we did bill by the hour. That's the only way we do, and we did it for a couple of years. And then we realized pretty quickly that by doing that and then charging the way we were doing, we end up being the bank for our clients. And we couldn't afford to be the bank. We bootstrapped our company completely. I'm living on credit cards when I first started, and didn't have that huge line of credit. And it was one of those things that out of necessity, we had to figure a different way out. And that's when we started bundling services and then offering a flat fee for it. We did it on a monthly basis. We thought it was great. We always underestimated how quick it would take us to do something. And so we basically failed miserably for about 5, 6, 7 years. Couldn't price it right. We couldn't figure it out. And then eventually we started figuring it out. Once we started figuring it out, that's when things started changing. Instead of doing it on a monthly basis, we start hitting clients on a weekly basis. And that was a godsend for us. It was why not? And every time we did something like that, it was hey, will clients ever do that? And then all of a sudden it's well, yeah, we're going to tell them that's how it's going to be. And they just did it.
It's policy, right? It's policy.
Yeah, how we do it.
You can't fight City Hall.
Nobody pushed back ever. And we always thought that we would lose our clients, or we wouldn't pick up as many clients. And in reality, I think we picked up even more because we basically took away the barrier of entry. It's hey, you're not signing up for an $80,000 CFO engagement. You're signing up for a $1,500 a week CFO engagement. You know what? And if we can't prove our worth, then you can cancel anytime you want. And that's the cool part about it. And then start bundling everything, so it wasn't, we didn't have to worry about phone calls people would make and making sure that we build that out separately, then arguing about the bill and how many people are on that call and who gets billable time for it and who doesn't. We got rid of all of that and all that noise that typical accounting firms have. And it was definitely a different journey. But like you, we we're on top of the hill saying, hey, this is how you do it, everyone. This is perfect. It's working really great. And then we would go to these conferences like you and talk about it. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, that's great, but it would never work for us. Right. And here's why.
Right. And they had a million different reasons and they all contradicted one another. Well, that's easy for you, Ron. You're west of the Mississippi. I'm east of the Mississippi. You're a small firm. I'm a big firm. Whatever it was, there was always an excuse.
Yeah, ours was like, oh yeah, that works only for virtual CFO services or maybe bookkeeping service, but that would never work for auditing. So we thought, you know what? Adam's like, hey, let's try for auditing. And we did. We created a flat fee audit. We did the 401k audits, no problem at all. We created some basis around it, highly profitable. We and it was pretty amazing. It was funny every time they'd ask about, hey, it won't work for taxes. Well, it worked for taxes. We did it for taxes too. So we did it for taxes. We did it for audits, and we did it for CFO. And it's like, well, what else can't we do it for? And so you kind of start running out of things that it couldn't be done. But even then, when we showed people that, it was still, that will never work here.
Yep. Even when you show people empirical evidence, it doesn't sway them. Logic won't sway people. It's a human, some type of human defect or something. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's amazing. And Jody, you figured out subscription long before I did. I mean, I didn't do subscription when I practiced, and you also niched, which I really admire. When did you niche? When did you decide to really focus in on, what was it, creative agencies, basically?
Yeah. We niched two different ways. So we did, first of all, we said, hey, we're only going to do virtual CFO stuff, and then we eventually added audit to it. But that was the idea. So virtual CFO, so that was kind of our platform. And then about 2011, we picked up our truly virtual client, which was a company out of Rhode Island. It was a 60-person shop. They were completely remote. And, we were in Indiana. We were located right in Fort Wayne. And we're like, well, how are we going to do this? And, they asked us, hey, we love you. We love what you say on the internet. We love how you do things. And then the question was, hey, would you have to come out and visit us? And we're like, do you want us to come out and visit you? And they're like, well, no. And they go, well, then we wouldn't come out and visit you. And so we started niching at that point. And so we started really working with that client on a very remote basis, which was completely different back then. And the clients loved it. And they were a marketing agency. And it was just one of those things that truly, if I were to redo, start all over again, I probably would run a marketing agency and not an accounting firm. I just enjoy marketing. Marketing is more of a passion for me than accounting. But anyways, the idea was, hey, they loved us so much, they started referring other clients. We're like, or their competitors to us. We're like, hey, this is kind of cool. And so we picked up 2 or 3, and we started figuring out the vernacular that they use, and it was kind of amazing. And then it just all of a sudden, our normal growth, which you're promoting this virtual CFO service, which we thought was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we were picking up 1 to 4 clients a year. And we knew it wasn't sustainable, wasn't, growing. When we started hitting that vertical in about 2011, that's when we really saw it really hockey stick up there. We went from picking up 1 to 4, possibly a year, to 11 a month. And it was like, wow, what's going on? And that's when we realized we didn't know how to price anything because we were closing 80% of these things. We're like, hey, this is great. And I'm like, hey, got another one for $15,000 a year. Woohoo. And then once we figured out how to price it, which did take about 2 to 3 years, because what we started to do is we started saying, you know what, if we can get it down to 30% close ratio, then it's priced effectively. And it took us a while to get down there, which is kind of weird. You would think about that, but we were like, hey, I can't wait to turn people down, because we just had so much opportunities there. We just couldn't do it. We couldn't hire the people fast enough to service them. So it was one of those things that if we'd have done hourly, we would have limited our growth completely, and it just wouldn't have worked. But it really forced us, not only in that niching part of it, it forced us to figure out an industry, but it also forces how to actually be profitable with the amount of money that we agreed upon. Because it's not like you can't go to a subscription base and say, hey guys, we screwed up. Your fee is not $1,500 a week; it's $3,000, and that starts next week. What do you think? You can't do that. That's just, you can't do that. That's not going to work. And so we had to figure it out, and that's when technology was a real key player for us. Really kind of figuring out, hey, how can we do process? And that's where Adam really just shined big time, because he was able to really work with the team and figure out, hey, what can we do in our process? What can make those better? What technology can we actually bring in to help out? And Adam, I think with what you've done with us, I don't think we could have done it just me alone or just you alone. I think it was really that combination, which was huge, because the ideas are one thing, but to implement those as well as Adam did, it was definitely a huge part of our success.
That's awesome.
It's definitely a lot of trial and error. Ron, I'd be curious from your perspective. I mean, especially with, a firm that's a little more established. Like for Jody and I, we did have I wouldn't say luxury, but we had the ability, because we were so small. And frankly, our bar was set pretty low from a pricing standpoint, that we were kind of battling the other way. But whenever you take a successful firm, somebody that's making good money off of hourly rates and doing those kind of things, whenever we're kind of trying to approach this as a firm, I think I've read books where there's like 9 C's and there's 27 C's, but it's really like cost is the floor, customers the ceiling, and then competitors somewhere in there. But what is a good way to kind of just approach conversion, I guess, in
a big firm
in terms of tax or whatever, but they're successful. They're making a lot of money, charging hourly rates. Clients are paying it. Realizations 90+%, that kind of thing. Then talk me through kind of like whenever you're approaching clients and thinking through this, what's that approach look like?
Yeah. And it is a different approach for smaller firms and larger firms. Cause most of the attraction we got with, moving off the billable hour to value pricing was with the smaller firms. Same with subscription. It was all the smaller firms. It's the smaller firms that innovate. The big firms, yeah, they have their initiatives, but they're not really changing the business model. So it's a bigger challenge in a larger firm. And the first thing is just mindset. You've got to sound like a broken record. You got to go in there and try and get everybody singing off the same page. And you know what? You're not going to get all the partners. Some of them are going to think you're absolutely bonkers, and they're not going to want to change in their little sphere of influence or their book of business. And you just got to work around them and, keep them in the loop, show them success. Maybe you can get them that way. But I have found that even accountants are impervious to empirical evidence, which blows my mind, because we're supposed to be an evidence-based profession. And sometimes I don't think we are. But I'll tell you, we just interviewed Matt Armanino on the show last Friday. And Matt Armanino's, CEO of Armanino, and I think they're number 17 or something. And I was their chief value officer in 2018 to around the time COVID hit. And so it was 2 years. I got in there and I started working with the partners, at least the ones that agreed with me. Some thought I was nuts. The first day I was there, a guy took me out to a Thai restaurant, a partner, sat me down, looked at me and said, "We made a big mistake hiring you. I can't believe they did that." It was a great way to kick off a relationship.
Welcome.
Yeah. Welcome to the firm. This is your onboarding lunch and offboarding. It was very efficient. And he turned out to be the biggest advocate I had, because he tried it and he figured out, man, this works. 3 options. Let the client decide. And he was the biggest convert. And then I just started recruiting from different practice areas, partners, and we put together a task force and we just started helping people price. We were kind of like a, concierge service. You could call us in when you were pricing a proposal, pricing a new client, converting an existing customer, whatever it was, we would be there. And Matt told us on the call last week that the firm is 100% away from the billable hour. Now, they still do timesheets, which he admits now is not, he wants to get rid of that too. But, that's progress, and that's a big firm. But I'll tell you, it takes years. It's not measured in weeks or months. like it is in a smaller firm. It's measured in years.
Well, that's why I need your books on Audible, because that's where we started, was mindset.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get everybody on the same page.
It's very frustrating. I mean, you can parade Jody in front of them. You can parade people in front of them who have done it, literally done it. And it still doesn't, they'll always find, well, that's easy for you. You're a small firm. You're east of the Mississippi. Your partners drive Lexuses, mine drive Hondas, whatever. All the excuses come out. And I used to tell people, look, they'd say, well, you can't run a firm without, tracking time or billing by the hour or whatever. And I'd say, look, I only need one firm to disprove you. I don't need 1,000. I don't need 10,000. I need one. And I've already done it. So I know it works. But you got to invest in it. Pricing has to become a core competency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that extent, I mean, I do find it, as I'm like trying to value-based bill items, I do find that advisory services seem to come easier to be able to do that, because it's a little bit nebulous and it's a little more result driven, in terms of some of those things. But how would you approach, frankly, in this space, and we talked a little bit about AI, it's a little bit of a race to the bottom with a lot of these compliance audits. Yeah. And so, I got to think that there's value there, even if the value's like being frictionless for the customer, getting it done on time. But a lot of times the reason why it's not done on time is not because of us, it's because the customer's kind of dragging. So how do you think about things that are less, that don't necessarily have this inherent value? Like, I'm going to take you to, this valuation that's going to get you an exit, like from an advisory standpoint. People can kind of buy into that. But what about on compliance driven kind of products?
Right. And on compliance, especially with AI eating hours like you wouldn't believe, it should be, to price a compliance project is much easier than pricing an advisory, because compliance supposedly has a market rate, right? I mean, there's a tighter band with a compliance service like a tax return or something. And so those, I think, are pretty easy. And I think what we're going to see especially with AI, is the compliance is going to be given away. It's just going to be bundled in, and the money's going to come from the advisory. That's where the real value is. I think we're going to have to reframe how we think about value. What is the customer really buying? It's not a tax return. In fact, it's really none of the services. They're buying a transformation. They want to go from where they are to where they want to be, some desired future state. And I think if we do that, then we change the conversation, and value communication becomes a little easier. The other thing I'd say, Adam, back to your question about how you do this in a big firm, do the low-hanging fruit. Start with options, 3 options. Make them do 3 options for every proposal, every new customer that comes in the door. 3 options, period. And then you'll find that the people will look at it and go, wow, the customer chose the top, or most of them choose the middle. It's like, yeah, and where does that extra revenue go? It goes right to the bottom line. If some of that differentiation of those options is not just based on the scope of work. We have to get out of this idea that we're selling our hands to make money. No, you're selling your minds, and there's lots of ways to leverage that. There's turnaround time, there's who works on the project, how often you meet with them, other things that we can bundle in. And a big firm, I used to salivate when I was at Armanino, because in a small firm, you can only do so much. These guys are capable of doing everything. It's like, oh my God, it's like working in a hospital. You have all the right surgeons and, a pharmacy and the radiology department. I mean, they had everything. It's like, why aren't we bundling it? Why does tax work in a silo? Audit works in the silo. Advisory works in the silo. The customer gets 6 bills from our firm. This is nuts. We should bundle it all, and that would really give us some pricing power and some optionality.
You're in our meetings apparently, because that's exactly the conversations we're having. So I mean, what about? And I don't mean to hog the conversation, but my mind's just going in a million different places hearing you kind of talk about this stuff. How about change orders? Like, I heard you say something about that earlier. I think, how do you go about identifying, when to do? Because again, if you're talking about 20 different people or 40 different partners billing, like, how do you What's your stance on change orders, and how does that work, I guess?
Yeah, change orders. I big advocate with value pricing, scope creep, change order. I mean, that, I think the contractors invented it. Today, I'm trying to blow up scope. I think scope is bureaucracy. I think scope is customer friction. I think it throws up a hurdle. I think it throws up another pricing decision, which we probably don't need.
Right.
Because ask yourself this. I find this question amazing. Why don't doctors have scope creep? Doctors don't deal with scope creep. How is that even possible? Now, somebody's challenged me on that. Said, oh, yeah, they do. You come back if they got the surgery wrong. That's not scope creep. That's like a technical issue. Doctors don't have scope creep because they stay in their lane. A general, what a general practitioner does, but more importantly, what they don't do. They're not going to do cardiology surgery. They're not going to replace your knee, your hip. They're not going to give you oncology services. They're going to shuffle you to a specialist. And in fact, we even interviewed a DPC doctor, GP, and we asked him, what things that I would expect you to do that you don't do? And he prattled off a long list of stuff they won't touch, even though it would come under the domain of a GP. One of them was pilot certification, workplace injury. He said there's better specialists out there. Doctors aren't afraid to send you to a specialist. For some reason, we believe we have to do everything.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, I guess. Well, for us, we've always said, like, at least in our space, you don't have to know everything, but you should know everyone. So for us, It is more about our value is being able to bring those specialists to the table.
Absolutely.
Say, this is when you need this person and that person. So, and then we've been able to kind of, we have a pretty prescriptive approach in terms of meeting cadence that's allowed us to kind of control the narrative a little bit on that side of the house. But outside of that, I was just kind of curious because I do think that, like, whenever I look at our friends over on, specifically on the tax department, all the tax partners and managers, they're all advisors. Mm-hmm. They are no different than what Jody and I were doing from day one. Mm-hmm. And then we realized, well, hell, we're getting paid for doing this one thing, but the fun and all the other stuff is all these business conversations. Now, the one argument that I would make on the tax side for larger firms is they are also getting paid for that at an hourly rate. Now, sometimes that creates that friction that you're talking about. And that's why change orders scare me a little bit, is because that's just another point in which to, instead of selling access, now you're selling, again, your time, because now it's like a change order, a service or something. So I was just curious how you approach that.
Yeah. And the other thing, if you have three options and the customer picks the top one, then I'm going to be much more liberal about no change orders. Because hopefully I've priced it so high, the margins are so good, we don't have to worry about piddly little things. I'm more interested in customer lifetime value than the math of the moment anyway. And I think change orders looked way too much at the math of the moment. So what? Okay, yeah, so what? You spent another 50 hours on that customer this month because they had a pressing need. It's an investment in a relationship. Timesheets and don't attract that, And I think that's a gap.
Yeah, we would agree. That's kind of the way we built our model, was like, if you get the, we would say it's kind of like the all you can eat, like that service option one in your model. If you pick that, it's like all those, that's included. Yep, that's included. Don't worry about that conversation. Whenever we would move downstream and you'd get to like, I just need the bare bones, just keep in mind these conversations would be outside of the scope. That was easy for us to delineate. So
yeah, boy, when you say all you can eat, that's what kind of got me to studying doctors is people would freak out. Oh my God, they camp out in my office. They, blah, blah, blah. And this has not been the experience of concierge doctors or direct primary care physicians. 90% of their calls happen during business hours. People don't come in, and the doctors are even scared. Well, what about the cyberchondriacs, that are going to come in with the Dr. Google with every disease known to man? It just doesn't happen. All you can eat. I want to move to a profession that is paid because they're enabled to do something for you when you need it, rather than being paid for when they do something. And, think about a priest. A priest doesn't walk around with a digital price list. Oh, you want me to officiate your wedding? You want me to, or do your funeral? Do you want me to, baptize your child? And, a static price list. No, they're paid so they can be in that role to do what you need when you need it.
Sure.
And that's part of blowing up scope. But
yeah,
in fact, we talked with Matt, and he thought this was an intriguing idea. I said, why does Norman have a black card? I subscribe to you and I get whatever the hell I need.
Yeah.
If I need well services, you guys have well services. If I need estate planning, you guys have estate plan. I mean, you kind of know the boundaries of what clients need. Why can't the other thing I'll throw at you guys, all of you, is because I find this fascinating. I think with AI, we're going to start to see this more, and I'm curious if you've seen it, is I'm surprised that our profession hasn't got into different branding. We try and be all things to all people under the same brand. And Tim Williams taught me that a brand can only stand for one thing. You can't be Morton's and McDonald's under the same roof. But what you can do is you can have different brands in your portfolio. Lexus, they have a mass market brand, Toyota. I'm sorry, Toyota has, mass market, and then they have their skim brand, Lexus, Honda, Acura. Why don't we see that in our profession?
That's a great question. Because when we came into Anders, we thought that we were going to be a different brand coming in, and in reality, they didn't want that. They wanted us to be Anders, and I would push back with you. I mean, it's like, you've got your high end, you got your low end, you've got your reoccurring, you've got your project work. You could separate different brands pretty easily and come up with it. Even industries, you could have. Anders, cannabis, and have it all green and flowery and stuff like that. Then you could have, marketing, you could have lawyers, more suit and tie type of thing. There's a lot of different ways you can brand it. Because I think, especially if you want to grow nationally, I think, they need the people nationally need to know that, hey, this company in St. Louis knows lawyer stuff. If you look at the website, it's all lawyer stuff. Or they know cannabis, and look they know cannabis. Look at all the publications they've written on cannabis. You can see it. I think that's really how you really grow nationally, how you grow fast nationally, and really get that presence. So why don't they do it? I think it's just more traditional. Hey, this is how accounting firms always done it. They always gobbled up smaller firms, and they brought it within, kind of like the Borg type relationship in Star Trek. It's like well, that type of. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say the other thing I hear in coaching calls with accounting firms is when you talk about niche, it seems like their mind often goes to, if I say I'm really good at lawyers, only lawyers will want to talk to me and no other kind of profession.
Right.
And we'll often point out that even with all of our stuff with creative agencies, it's still less than half of the VCFO work that we do. And we do great work for all sorts of kinds of customers, but we're really targeting and saying we're really good at that particular one. So I think that's a false being afraid. If I pick one, then no one else will even look at me.
I'll lose revenue. I know if CPAs were veterinarians or sign outside would say vet and taxidermist, that way they could say either way you get your cat back.
That got dark. Yeah, I mean, I even think even the house of brands, I mean, makes sense. I mean, even whenever you think about whenever you're niching down, you say I'm the cannabis CFO, as rather than Anders. Like, even if you try to pigeonhole parts of the website and you funnel all your content, it's another thing to like have it in your name. You know what I mean? Like to be able, and what stops you from having 8 different names, and it's all apparent, like Anders is still the parent company, but you have specific names for different verticals. So people start to recognize that.
And I think we're going to see it more as AI, commoditizes the compliance work, drives it down and puts pricing pressure on it. Then you either separate it or you just include it like a loss leader into the advisory work. So, I mean, I know there's different ways to cut that, but I'm just, I've always been amazed that we don't have separate brands. We see some advertising agencies do it. Ogilvy had it, Ogilvy Red, and then they had Ogilvy Works. They took all their compliance, resizing the banner ad and doing websites, all the compliance that an agency has to do is pretty low value and shop by procurement. They put into Ogilvy Works, which they called a beautiful factory. It was all offshore. Everything was low cost, but then Ogilvy Red was the ideation, the creation, the high value advisory work. I don't know if they still have that, but they did do that split at one time, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Help me dispel a myth. And like, one of the things that I think is a little bit problematic sometimes, this has been difficult for us, but with a larger team, is around, I think some of the hesitation is how do you look at individual, we're going to go with time tracking here. How do you deal with individual targets and, goals and things of that, and measuring performance from the team, when from a financial perspective, whenever there's no, obviously we know they're doing a good job, those kind of things. But I'm saying, if you want to be objective from a financial piece, especially whenever they're sharing projects, sharing revenue. Right. So even if you go to something that's like revenue per head count, well, it doesn't mean my revenue per head count is divisible the same way yours is. You know what I mean? So how are you recommending people think about those kind of metrics?
Right. And look, that's a challenge because I know, all of this stuff is interdependent. So you can't just change one part of the system without affecting others, right? It's the human body. We worked with a law firm that wanted to do away with timesheets, and that was their exact problem with it, because they would allocate revenue to each. Now, this wasn't a law firm. It was the lobbying division. They were in D.C. They actually lobbied. So they were a lobbying firm, but they were mostly lawyers. But they wanted to track revenue by person. And because, bonuses and comp and promotions were all based on that. And they said, how can we do that if we don't have them keep timesheets? And I said, well, if you're fixed pricing and you're giving options, which we got them to do, I said, throw the people who are going to work on the project, throw them in a room and make them divide up the revenue ahead of time. What's going to be your contribution? What's going to be your because I'll tell you, in that business, sometimes there was the chief lobbyist lawyer. He'd pick up the call, pick up the phone, get a appointment with a congressman or their aide. That was like 50% of the job right there. That was 50. And they would allocate 50% of the revenue to that guy just for making a phone call because he had the connection. Now, these were lawyers. They set up an appeals process. What if somebody doesn't carry their weight? Right. And they never had to trigger it, but it made them feel good that they worked out all the contingencies. But I said, throw them in a room ex ante and have them divide. I said, they'll be fair and they'll hold one another accountable. Yeah. So somebody's going to get voted off the island if they're not pulling their weight. Social pressure works really well with professionals, by the way.
So it's basically about the importance of what you're doing versus what the time you're putting into it.
Exactly. Yep.
I like that idea.
It wasn't just the time, for sure.
So then what about like gross profit per engagement? How are you validating, without time and effort going into a project, how are you validating whether or not your pricing is good?
Yeah, because I'm not looking at hours, remember, so I don't, I'm projecting the hours ahead of time. And if I'm a good pricer, I can usually, a good pricer should be able to cover their costs, right? Otherwise, I'd say fire your pricing department. I had one guy from a big firm, you would all know it. And he asked me, he says, what if I have $1 million job and we've got 2 million into it? And I said, you need to fire your pricers. If a pricer can't anticipate, I asked him, I said, how many decades of timesheet data do you have? How could you possibly make a mistake like that?
Yeah.
You should know what everything takes down to the rat's butt 6 minutes, right? Because you've got all its data. Of course, nobody goes back and looks at it. And then they tell me this, that, well, every job's different. Well, then why track time? If every job's a black hole that we've never seen before, then I don't even want to hire you. It's the last thing I want to hear from my surgeon, right? Wow, look at that. I've never seen that before. So I'm not a fan of tracking engagement profitability or customer profitability. I like to look at the portfolio as a pricer, I'm trying to maximize the return across the entire portfolio, not the math of the moment on each engagement, especially with subscription, where the real goal is customer lifetime value. And therefore, I think that makes the margin per engagement almost meaningless. Plus, you guys think of this cost accounting. Cost accounting is a joke. It's full of a bunch of crappy assumptions. It's lousy math. It's based on the number of customers that you have at any one given time. How do I allocate, toilet paper to one job? It's kind of insane when you start to think about the assumptions we have to make as a cost accountant to allocate costs to a particular job. I know we try and do it with labor, which is our biggest cost, but what about rent? What about technology costs? How do I allocate that out? And that allocation is going to be different if I have 50 customers or 500 customers.
Right.
It's heavily dependent on volume.
Yeah. I definitely am anti, true cost accounting for service labor for that exact reason. Like, no applied overhead, please. But on the direct labor, what we do is we look for more like trends. To your point, we're not necessarily fixated on whether or not we're profitable in the moment. We're looking over like a running 12 months, yellow, red, or green, and pretty broad percentages, like probably 10, 15 points in each color range. And then we're just looking for trends. Like, is it trending up or is it trending down? And then those invite conversations with if Tom's working on the engagement, it's like, hey, Tom, it looks like this one's burning hot for the last 3 months. Yeah, they're considering bankruptcy, blah, blah, blah. It's a short-term thing. I think I'm good, because then it just invites, from a managerial perspective, it just invites questions of, hey, is there scope creep here? Is there something going on? Otherwise, we don't really have any insights. And my experience has been with working with teams is they will usually complain when nothing's there, and then not complain when something is there. Not always, but it just seems like it's like, oh, I can't stand this client. They're terrible. And then you look into it and you're like, well, from a gross profit standpoint, we're like doing great, actually maybe too well, but you'll complain that they suck. It's a different conversation. I think it's like the client actually sucks the life out of you as opposed to like the hours, but you tell me you're spending too much time on them. And then the reverse will happen. You'll be like, oh no, like working with Ron's great. And it's like, really? Because it looks like, 40% of your work goes to Ron and we're charging him $1,000 a week. Like, what's going on? It's like, but they enjoy hanging out with you. So it's like, I guess that's the only part that I try not to use the time or the gross profit as a measure in time. It's more of just like looking back and just seeing like this gigantic heat map of where things are heading and how they're moving. And that's how we use it. Knowing that, to your point, it's also a little fluffy because people aren't tracking time to the very specific hour. So it's kind of a little loose anyway.
Unless you've got that spyware on their computer.
Don't tell them about that. I mean,
I actually called the one AI product that does that. And you guys know who I'm talking about, I'm sure. And I called it spyware and the CEO got pissed off. He was really pissed off. In fact, I think that was in New York, Jody, at the executive roundtable. Yeah. I said, this is like having the Stasi, here. This is great. I feel like I'm an East German. Well, my answer to that, you guys, and I think we had a show on this, is the after action review. I really do think the after action review gives you that granular data that you need. Why do you want to work with Ron? Why do you spend so much time? You would get that data or that information that you don't just see looking at a number on a timesheet or a vector graph. I mean, I get looking at trends. I like that. But I think there's other ways to do it too, so you can get more granular knowledge about what's going on with the job or the customer or whatever. And plus, I think that improves future performance when you do an after action review.
How do you do it with engagement? Yeah, ongoing engagement like that. I mean, with projects, I get that completely. How would you do that with a engagement that's going to last 4 to 10 years?
Right. But I would probably do it at a cadence level, like maybe every 6 months you sit down and the people that work on that customer get together. They talk about, objectives, what went right, what went wrong, how could we do it better? You could do it that way. Once firms get good with it internally, they usually start to do them externally with the customer. And that's when it gets really fun, because you go out to the customer and you have the same type of after action review process with the customer. And the customer's like, wow, this is so much more meaningful than a net promoter score or a survey, to actually sit down with the people who work on that customer and go through an after action review. It's really an amazing process, but again, it does take some time, and firms don't do it because it's not billable, or they think it's a waste of time. But I think it's your invisible balance sheet. This is where you're capturing your knowledge and getting those improvements into your tech stack, into your standard operating procedures that you can't get any other way. This is why the Army's fanatical about doing them. There's a great documentary on the Thunderbirds, and there's one on the Blue Angels. I think they're on Netflix, but they show you their after action review process after they do an air show. It's like 4 hours. And it's one of those safe spaces where the pilots can admit, yeah, I screwed that up. It's not a blame game. It's a learning game. How are we going to improve next time we go out there? And it's a brilliant process, and we just don't use it.
That's a great idea. Hey, Ron, as we're starting to work our way toward finishing, I'd be curious, and I'm going to also ask Adam and Jody. So I'll start with you. As far as your books, someone who we piqued their interest, especially around the time entry, things like that, where would you suggest that people, maybe it's not your book, maybe it's one of your podcasts, where would you suggest people start to say, okay, here's how you can learn more and start in this direction?
Wow. If you wanted to move away from hourly billing to value pricing, I'd recommend implementing value pricing. And there's a whole suggested reading list in that book, and one of the appendixes that gives a lot more recommendations for other books on pricing and just becoming a pricing expert. Because I do view value pricing as a different business model than subscription. And if you're interested in moving to the subscription model, no matter where you are today, whether it's hourly billing or even value pricing, then Time's Up would be the book. Both of them deal with the fallacies of cost accounting and all of that. So, but I think the subscription model is more in tune with our future than value pricing. I think AI is just putting a lot of pressure on. Did you see in Australia where KPMG asked their auditor, Grant Thornton, who's been doing their audit for like 10 years? This is KPMG International. And they said, well, you guys are using AI to do our audit. We want to cut in the fee. And KPMG got a $76,000 reduction, I think 14% or something, from Grant Thornton, because they use AI. And I thought, and KPMG's my alum, so I kind of have a vested interest in them. And I said, well, I hope you enjoyed the 76 grand, boys, because what do you think's going to happen now?
You just cannibalize yourself.
Yeah, every customer you have is going to say the same thing. Hoist it on the petard of the billable hour. If that's all you talk about, we've got nothing left to talk about with AI, because it does stuff in minutes.
I love it. Okay. And then, that was great. I hope people will start with both of those and say this is where they want to go. So then I think for all of us, and Jody, I'll start with you, business book recommendation. So what do you think is one of the most impactful ones that you have read? I won't give you a time frame. One of the most impactful books you've read or recommended to people.
Yeah, I would say we created the company on the eMyth Revisited, and that was the whole idea. Hey, let's create repeatable processes, and those repeatable processes really led into subscription-based billing. Hey, we got our processes down to where every client's going to get the same summit effect at that point. Now Andrew's effect. And it just all led into subscription-based billing. So I would say eMyth Revisited by far was number one. And then, Ron, I hate to say this, but, a few of your books back then, I can't remember the names of them anymore, but they're in my shelf back in Indiana, true books. And they have heavily influenced the way that we decided to go ahead and try it. We didn't agree with everything that you had in the book, but we thought, hey, we'll take bits and pieces of it and see if we can get this thing to work. And it did. It was like, wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It actually works. And then we then implemented it on and tried to tell everybody else how great it is. And then, got pushback, and still get pushback, obviously, even today. But I would say, you were a huge influence on us on how growing the subscription-based billing model, the value-based pricing, the flat fee billing, everything from the very beginning. We had to figure out an alternative. It was either figure it out or go work for somebody. And working for somebody, Adam and I are like, that ain't happening. So we're not making that.
You can't wear a Hawaiian shirt when you work for somebody.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well, no, that's great, Jody. Thank you. I mean, you guys are poster boys. I talk about Summit all the time because you guys have proven the model. This works, and there's different ways to do it. There's not just one way. So that's fantastic to hear.
That's great. Adam, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jody. Those were definitely the foundations of our firm for sure. Ron, definitely huge influence. E-Myth. If I had to pick outside of those, I would say 4 Disciplines of Execution is big for me. And then also it's a book called Stark Naked Numbers. And it's a guy from Australia, Jason Andrews, wrote a book, and it's like if I was going to write a book, almost verbatim, same vernacular, everything, how he approaches the business and the modeling and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty dialed in from a consulting standpoint, I think.
Awesome. Tom, I do have one more for you because I didn't know you were asking about books.
I would love it.
I think the best book of the year is obviously going to be Joe Pine's The Transformation Economy. It's one of the books behind me here. I've read the book. I've read the book before it came out because he's got a Substack where he's been writing it, throwing out the chapters to his readers. We had Zoom calls together. We'd give him feedback. It's a paradigm busting book. He's making the case that we are moving into a new economic era, not just a business model change, a new economic era of offering transformations. And I think he's right on. And this is the guy that called the experience economy back in the 90s. And he called the transformation economy back then too, because it was in his first 1999 book. Now we're starting to see it. And we've done a few shows with him on it. We've done shows with other authors of transformation books, and it's all over the place. You're starting to see it. You saw it a lot during the Super Bowl commercials.
So what was the name of the book again, Ron?
The Transformation Economy.
It's The Transformation Economy.
You said by Joe Pines?
By Joseph Pine. Yeah, I think it's Joseph Pine. Yep.
Pine. Okay. Oh, that's excellent.
Does he have Audible?
I think he does. Yes. I think they do have an Audible of it. Yeah.
That's great.
It's a short book too, by the way. It's less than 300 pages. So it won't take you too long to get through it.
You're saying I could get through it and read it then?
Yeah. Jody wanted to know how big the print is and if it's got
Does it have pictures?
Does it have pictures? It does, actually. It's got some graphs.
It is on Audible. So it's downloaded now for me. So
that's perfect.
And I'm happy, you guys read that. I'm happy to come back and chat with you about it and how we're trying to help firms implement what he's talking about, because it's really, it gives them something new to talk about. And it's not just AI. We can guide transformations for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. You guys have named several books that I have not read that now I'm really excited about a couple different ones. So thank you for that. Ron, is always fantastic conversation. Thank you. I know we covered a lot of good things, but I always leave motivated and have learned a lot from the conversation. So I really appreciate that. And Jody, thank you for joining us today. You don't usually join in, and this was fun having you in here as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jody.
I heard Ron was going to be on. I was like, I got to be there.
That's cool. And thank you, Tom, Adam. It's really great to be with you guys. I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thanks. Everyone have a great day.